Hi there, folks. Welcome back to the WP-Tonic. This week in WordPress and startups, we've got a great guest. I've been really looking forward to this interview. We're going to be talking everything about WordPress and community. And we've got Michelle Frechette. I've just butchered her. Frechette. That's not too bad for me because the listeners.
Not bad at all.
The listeners are very used to my total butchery of our guests' names. Don't take it personal, Michelle. I've also got old co-host returning. He's been busy running his own business, but for this week and occasionally through the months, he will be coming back on the show. I've got Stephen back. So, Stephen, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the tribe again, Stephen?
Yeah, my name is Stephen Sauer from hustlefish.com. We're an agency that focuses primarily on WordPress.
And like I say, I've got Michelle, and Michelle is the Director of Community Engagement at StellarWP, better known as the hosting company Liquid Web. But Stellar deals with everything around StellarWP, which is the company that has all the plugins and other things focused on WordPress, which Liquid Web owns. So Michelle really knows the stuff about community. So Michelle, do you want to also give a quick 10-second, 15-second intro about yourself, and then we'll go into the main part of the interview, Michelle?
Sure. Well, as you said, I work at StellarWP, which is the plugins part of Liquid Web. I am also the Podcast Barista at WP Coffee Talk, and I am half of the podcast and project directors of Underrepresented in Tech.com, which works to help people who are in the underrepresented parts of technology find space at the table, as we say. I'm also the the president of the board at Big Orange Heart, which is a nonprofit around the mental health challenges that we sometimes face as independent and remote workers. So
I thought I was busy, Michelle, but you're a busy lady, to say the least.
Yeah, and I also write, and I'm on the staff at Post Status. So if you're familiar with Post Status.
Oh well. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to be nice to Post Status. It's like kicking a dead cooked dog. So there we go. So sorry. Before we go into the main part, I'm going to get in trouble for that remark. Before we go into the main part of this great interview, I've got a message from our major sponsors. We'll be back in a few moments. We're coming back. Got some great offer from Castos and also Blog Vault, our new major sponsor, plus all the other sponsors. And I've got some recommendations around plugins, services that I use myself. You can get all these goodies, and they're all free, Tribe, by going to WP-Tonic/recommendations, and you find all the goodies there. And being that you're WordPress startup people, you love your goodies, don't you? So I've already got myself into trouble for my previous comment, so I need to go into this interview straight away. So let's start off, Michelle. How did you get into the crazy world of WordPress? You seem such a calm, nice lady. How did you get into this crazy world, Michelle?
It has something to do with nonprofits and spaghetti, believe it or not. But I was in higher education for 25 years. And at the time, I was running a massage school that was in 2 cities. And my best friend was a graduate of the massage school. And one of the things she said is people graduate and they have this, 1,000 hours of education, but they have no idea how to be business owners and the things that they need to be successful. So she wanted to start a nonprofit to support massage therapists in our state. And so she and I partnered up on that. And her husband built us a website in WordPress. He gave us logins and we started sending him the content. And his response was, hold up, ladies, I built the site. You get to populate it. I gave you a login, figure it out. So I logged into the website and I was like, just 2 things happened. First, I was afraid I was going to just crashed the whole thing by pushing a button I didn't know whether or not I should push. That did not happen, thankfully. But the other thing that happened was like, wow, like I could push publish and my thoughts appeared instantaneously in the world for other people to read and see. And that was heady, right? Like that was the stuff that,
the power, Michelle. You got the
right,
power.
seriously. I mean, like nobody knew the site existed, and like literally only the two of us are reading it, but the potential was there.
Oh yeah,
And
that's the word I use with all my clients. There's potential there. You've got to be very diplomatic, haven't
absolutely.
you? There's potential there.
There's potential.
There's
And
potential.
so I liked working with WordPress, and I thought this is something that I might be able to do for other people, a little business on the side, or at least, helping out people with marketing, because I have an MBA in marketing. And believe it or not, e-commerce,
Michelle,
but
I'm sorry to
didn't.
interrupt. I'm sorry, Michelle, but I'm just getting the impression you're a little bit of an overachiever.
Well, I am the oldest child. I think that comes along with that. But it was exciting the thought of being able to actually use the education that I had, but still, we learned everything about e-commerce, but we didn't learn how to build websites. And so I said to her husband, I said, would you be like I would pay you for your time, but would you teach me how to build, like how to go from owning a URL, a domain name, to actually having that be something on the web? I said, I understand like how to buy, hosting, and I understand how to buy a domain. What I don't know is how do I get the domain on the host with a website that I can start to build in. And so she worked nights. They had 5 children between them. And he said, if you come over and feed the kids, I'll teach you how to do that. So I went over, we made spaghetti. That's where the spaghetti comes in. The kids cleaned up the plates, and we pulled up our laptops side by side. I purchased a domain, which I'm not even going to tell you what it was now, because it probably still exists on the Wayback Machine, and I would be embarrassed if anybody saw it, but because it was one of the first sites I ever built my own. But that wasn't just straight HTML. But I was just smitten with the idea. And he refused to teach me one button install. He said, one button install exists. You will use it. I know you'll use it, but I want you to understand how the process works. So we went to WordPress.org. We downloaded the files. We uploaded. He taught me how to change salt keys. I still don't understand what they mean. I understand what they do. And, but the idea of changing the salt keys and understanding what the WP config was, I literally had one piece of paper with 4 points written on it. I went home and redid that process for myself so that I would understand how to do it. And so I built my first website that way. And then I built a website for somebody else and somebody else. And over the last, now it's been 10 years, I've built over 300 different, one-pagers to multi-pagers to whatever, different websites. And by no means am I the guru of design or the guru of development, because I have very little, development chops, but over the years I've been able to figure out how to help other people grow their businesses, and as a result of that ended up in the WordPress community by wanting our local meetup to be able to do more and help more people. And so I took over organizing the local meetup. That turned into, hey, Rochester should have its own WordCamp. And I had the first WordCamp here. I started speaking at WordCamps. From that, I got a job as the first director of customer success at GiveWP. And as you probably know, GiveWP was acquired last year by Liquid Web, and that put me in the Liquid Web family, which is how I ended up at StellarWP. So it's one of those things where the more you get involved, the more you put yourself out into the community and really seek to build those relationships with people, the greater opportunities you have in the community. And that's kind of how I ended up where I am.
Here we go. The star is born, as I say. I think that was one of my twits to you, actually. Wasn't that? A star is born.
I think so.
Yeah. So, Stephen, over to you.
Yeah. So, what was like being involved in the WordPress community and starting a WordCamp and stuff when, like, in conversations that I've had with other people in the WordPress community and like even just like internally with myself, like, it feels like to be actively involved, like one should know how to code or know like more of like the underlying of WordPress. Was that hard to like get the courage to be like, no, like I can lead a WordCamp and I don't need to be able to, get into the code and know exactly how WordPress works under the hood? Or was that a very easy transition for you?
There was definitely some of that, what do they call it? Imposter syndrome at first, right? Because you're like, right? And like you sit down at this, like, what do they call it? The happiness bar, right? You sit down at this table and you're listening to people helping people, and it's like they're speaking Greek, right? Because it's like all of this, like, oh, I see you need this array. And I'm like, what's an array? And, all these other things that I've just like no clue about. And so there was a little bit of that. Before I even did anything really, I like kind of pulled the Band-Aid off and applied to speak at a WordCamp. And my topic was the hidden secrets of WordPress. Little things that people don't understand, like, like your screen options and things like that nobody thinks to look at those places. It's you kind of get in and there's this huge dashboard in front of you and you kind of figure out how to work through it. But there's a lot of things that can help you. So I gave that talk and I stood up in front of that room full of people who probably had been WordPressing way longer than me, thinking, I don't know if I can swear on here, but thinking, oh shit, these people are going to know way more than me. And they're going to be like, that's not true. No, you got that wrong. And instead what happened is I finished that talk. I went out to the happiness bar and I had a line of people ready to talk to me and pick my brain. And I thought, well, by golly, I do know what I'm talking about if other people are wondering and wanting to know more. And so it's like from there, I don't know, it's like I like the spotlight a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I also like helping people. And I think if you look at the body of work that I do and the things that I do and look at my bio and things like that, you'll see that the majority of what I have done in WordPress is because I really do want to help other people be successful.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Like that's one of the amazing parts of like that WordPress community is that like there's space for everybody, no matter where your knowledge is. And like somebody who's probably been coding WordPress forever can learn tons of stuff from somebody that just is, an admin guru that just knows everything on the admin dashboard. And it's a very beautiful, like sort of interplay of relationships and stuff within the WordPress system.
Well, one of the things that's important to me I tell this to everybody. I don't think of myself as the WordPress celebrity. Of course, I think of other people that way, but every person that you think of as a WordPress celebrity in the space is just a person who goes to bed at night, wakes up, tries to figure out what to have for breakfast, sits in front of a laptop, doesn't know what they're going to write or do first thing in the morning. We are all just people, right? So whether you are somebody who truly has that imposter syndrome, are afraid to talk to people, or you have all of the hubris in the world, right? The first time that somebody that I thought of as like one of my celebrities, like talked to me as an equal, like, hey, Michelle, I saw something that you did, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, fangirling over the fact that like these people were talking to me and knew who I was, right? It's just like, but it realistically, like everybody has to deal with kids with snotty faces and everybody has to deal with like, oh my God, it's raining out and I forgot my umbrella and whatever. And oh, I shouldn't have eaten that shellfish last night. Whatever it is, like we're all just human beings. And I think that's the beauty of the WordPress community.
So, Michelle, you got an impressive title, Director of Community Engagement. So what does that basically entail? What do you see as your key 2 to 3 key things that are on top of list that you see as being the most important elements of this title?
So a lot of what I do as the Director of Community Engagement is take a look at what our different plugins are and find ways that I can help people in the community, whether that's finding people that can give a talk somewhere, finding somebody at, let's say, at LearnDash that can do a talk at a local meetup whose people are asking about doing courses, or somebody who needs more ideas of how to use WooCommerce, and I can connect them with Iconic, or like Do the Woo, right? So that podcast, I have made lots of opportunities for people at within all of our plugins that are using WooCommerce or have integrations with WooCommerce to be able to get out in the community. And it's not just to promote ourselves, of course I'm in marketing. Of course I want to promote ourselves. I'm not stupid. And I'm not going to try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. But the reason that we exist is because all of our plugins and all of our softwares help people achieve what they want to do. So I was with GiveWP for over 4 years. At GiveWP, we help nonprofits raise money to do the good that they do in the world. So if the local dog shelter to the biggest Ronald McDonald House can use GiveWP to raise money to help make a difference in whatever their community is. So if I can get somebody from Give talking and highlight them out in the world, that in turn helps more people learn about Give to do better in their communities. And so that is my goal, is to integrate us into the community as helpers, as people that can elevate other businesses and other nonprofits and organizations to be able to do better at what they do.
Just a quick follow-through question before we go for our break. Basically, and I don't think it solely relates to Stella and what you're doing, I think this is a general observation, is you seem like in the WordPress community, you seem to have really two extinct audiences. You have the kind of quasi-power implementer, graphic designer, developer, that's part of the ecosystem, as I call it, that go to WordCamps. And then you've got the end user that might do a search on Google, might be looking to build a membership site, a course, and they're used to WordPress. They like the idea of keep utilizing WordPress, and they just buy your plugin, but they have no real idea what they're going to do with it. How do you satisfy those two groups, and have you thought about that? I'm sure you have. And what are some of your insights about how you deal with these two very extinct groups, if you agree with my outline?
Sure. So the people who are, in the know, the WordPress users that understand WordPress and they understand, their websites, and they buy a plugin, and, we reach out to them and we're like, hey, do you need any help? They're like, listen, lady, back off. I got this covered. Right. So there's that group. And what we do is we just supply information. I think knowledge bases on websites, whether you call it documentation, knowledge base, whatever it is, keeping that as up to date as possible, and then being responsive to people's needs. I think that really satisfies a lot of the people who are kind of in the know, the designers, the developers. The other side, who are, let's say it is that dog shelter, and they're like bootstrapping, and they found WordPress because WordPress is cheap, and they want they want an events calendar, or they want a fundraiser on their website. Those are the people that they're like, oh, well, this will work, and they buy it, and they're like, oh my gosh, there are so many buttons, there are so many settings, what do I do? So for those people, not only is the knowledge base there, right? Because anybody can access knowledge base and documentation, but those people are also very active in our Facebook groups. So almost every one of our products has a Facebook group where people help each other. They ask each other questions. They ask for best practices. They ask for people's feedback on what they're building, whether it's a course, whether it's a site, whether it's a fundraising page. Whatever that is, we really do those kinds of things, plus webinars. We're running Twitter Spaces in some of our plugins. So we're trying to make us as accessible as possible, so that whether you have a ton of knowledge and one question, or no knowledge and a million questions, we can meet your needs. And that's really what community is about.
Yeah. So what I get from that is that, and I totally agree with what you've outlined, is that building community, is not only solely about building community in the WordCamp kind of developer power professional, but it's also utilizing communities to build resources that help the non-member of that larger WordPress community that just looking to use LearnDash because they got a specific need. Would I be all right about that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
There we go. I've got something right. Listeners and viewers, that's a rarity, isn't it? If you've been listening to this, we're going to go for, I like the show already. We're going to go for our break, folks. We'll be back in a few moments. We're coming back. We've had a feast about community. I just want to point out I do a fantastic newsletter. It has all the great weekly and news stories around WordPress and startups. It also has recommendations from the panel on the Friday show. Plus, it has an editorial that myself writes, and I have a sarcastic dig at many things or people in the WordPress community, and they love me for it. And I love them back. It's hilarious. Please sign up for it. How do you obtain this great newsletter, you might ask yourself? Well, go over to WP-Tonic/newsletter and you can sign up for that free. So, Michelle, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities? Not only challenge, normally, unless you're talking about death, normally in your challenges, there's also opportunities. You don't normally see it at the time, but that's how it normally pans out. What do you see some of the challenges, but also opportunities in WordPress in general in the next 12, 18 months?
I think one of the biggest challenges will be dealing with a post or almost post-pandemic community. I know that, in the height of what we considered lockdown and pandemic panic, we were doing absolutely no in-person events. And that was mostly because of, federal and state mandates and area mandates regional around the world globally. And there's still some of that, right? And there's still a fear. And my mother was just diagnosed yesterday with COVID, and so it's still a reality, right? And I think we're dealing with it better, and we know what we're doing better now, and the strains are better, et cetera. But when we were in lockdown type situation, everything was online. And so all of our WordCamps, those were subsidized to be online. Now that we are starting to return to in-person camps, for example, Porto, WordCamp Europe is coming up in June.
I'm going. Are you going, Michelle?
I'm not. My father's funeral is actually that same time. Thank you. But so I won't be able to attend. I was planning to, but he had to go and just do what he did. But the next one is Montclair.
I'm sorry, I'm coming across as a bit of a twit here. You're right. Sorry.
It is what it is, and he was a good man. But I can't be in two places at once. And so WordCamp Montclair will be my first in-person WordCamp. Will be at the end of June in Montclair, New Jersey. And as somebody who is a WordCamp mentor, as well as somebody who attends and speaks and also sponsors WordCamps through my work, I'm looking forward to that first in-person WordCamp, but I also know that it's not a possibility with the money that you raise to do both in-person and have that also be hybrid event and be online. The cost and the sheer number of people it takes to do either one or the other is ridiculous, and to double or triple that to have both of those. So I think the challenge is going to be, especially for people in remote areas who don't have the ability to travel, or who are either compromised physically and are afraid of travel in a coming of out of COVID kind of thing, will be the isolation that hits those people when they can no longer be attending all of those events online. And the camaraderie and the world felt a little bit smaller when we were all doing online events together. And I could, I spoke at WordCamp Taiwan. I spoke at WordCamp India because I didn't have to get in a plane and go to those places. And I was able to interact with people who are all the way around the globe from where I live. That's not going to be possible.
Do you think there's the possibility of hybrids where you might have one live event, but a short, maybe one day, and then you have a virtual element? I suppose it's difficult because I suppose this is the thing that people are just going to have to feel out, aren't they? How they deal with hybrid events, keep on doing online and doing live. It's just going to take a while to get a feel for it, won't it?
Yeah, the hybrid events are just too expensive. They really are. So you're not going to see WordCamps in hybrid unless they are the flagship events,
Yeah.
which is, WordCamp Asia, WordCamp Europe, and WordCamp US. But there are organizations like Big Orange Heart who have WordFest, right? So we do 2 WordFest lives a year, and that is a global event, 24 hours. It's not easy to stay awake for that 24 hours. I have to pick which continent I'm sleeping through, by the way, because I can't stay awake for 24 hours anymore. Because let's face it, 24 hours is not 24 hours. It's 24 hours of conference with a good 12 hours being
You're
awake
doing better than me,
before it,
Michelle.
right?
You're doing better than me, Michelle. I'm lucky to keep awake for 2 hours, let alone 24.
But those kinds of events, I think, webinars, WordFest, making sure that we still have a way for people around the world to be able to participate in community type events like that is going to be paramount to us continuing to have the kind of tight-knit community that we've really developed over the last few years.
That's great. Over to you, Stephen.
As you're thinking about, I don't know, the transition and the pros and cons, do you feel like you mentioned like all the Facebook groups and stuff, and I noticed like this huge bump in like just people talking and collaborating on Facebook during like the pandemic and stuff, just out of necessity, right? And I think we all just like leaned into that because that's where our communities were and stuff. But when you're thinking about like these plugins that do have like these communities that span geographic regions and time zones and stuff, do you think Facebook will still be like a primary place for people to get on and collaborate around? Or do you think like we'll start seeing people go in different directions and maybe that being broken up a little bit?
So I've actually thought about this a lot because a lot of other software solutions have tried to take the place of Facebook groups. Circle or Circles or something. I know it looks like Facebook, it acts like Facebook, but it's an additional login, right? That's something that I haven't seen be very successful yet. Anyway, Clubhouse, I had that on my phone for a hot minute, and then I was like, I'm done with this. I don't want to listen into all these conversations. Right. And then there's like the Twitter Spaces, which are good for like event type things, but it's not really building community. But now Twitter has this whole idea of this communities too, which is interesting because you still have to participate in 280 characters or less, right? So you can't really post the problems and questions that you can in a Facebook group. I haven't seen anything yet as ubiquitous as Facebook that makes it as easy to participate. So I'm going to guess that at least in the next, several years, it's still going to be Facebook groups that are going to be the primary places that we look to for these kinds of things.
What's your attitude towards Discord?
Discord is interesting, right? So Discord has the possibility, but again, it's one additional place. People are already logging into Facebook, right? They already have Facebook accounts. They're connected to their friends and family there. They're connected to their high schools and the people they went to, summer camp in 1982 with. God, I just aged myself really bad with that comment. But anyway, the idea of having one more thing. So if you're already a Discord user, that's great. Am I logged into Discord? Yes. Do I pay attention to it as often as I should? No. Am I logged in because of a certain community that I want to stay connected with? Yes. And so there's the possibilities, right? We use Discord for WordFest actually. On the day of WordFest, that's our behind the scenes communication. That's our walkie-talkies to each other. The rest of the months, the rest of the year, 363 days a year, we're not using Discord for that. So I think it has some potential, but I think it really has potential. I'm going to say it has potential for people who are younger than me who are in there anyway. I think it's, people who have adopted it for gaming and things like that. I'm 53 years old. Discord was like, right? Like I signed up for Twitch too. And I was like, oh, I don't even remember where login for Twitch was now, but there's all these different areas and different ways to be connected with one another. I still think though, that because of the age range that's still using Facebook, that is going to be the number one area for a while anyway.
Yeah, because obviously, as you know, Michelle, I'm doing a virtual summit in the end of September, and I've decided that our community chat and community building platform is going to be Discord, because I think there's a lot of for a live summit, using Facebook is probably not appropriate anyway, and there's a lot of baggage around, especially in the WordPress community, around utilizing it. And so I've been doing a big dive, and Discord has its own history and problems around security, and all these platforms have their pros and negatives, don't they? A lot of them.
I think for an event, something like Discord or Slack or one of those things is perfect, because it's real-time communication, conversation, and it's actually one area that you're looking at. You're not distracted by all the other things happening on Facebook. I think for community building over time, you want something where people will continue to log in and contribute.
Yeah. Exactly. Over to you, Steve.
Have you guys started talking about like metaverse type stuff in community building? Or is that still like, it's too bleeding edge? Nothing like that. Like let's wait years down the road before we even tackle that.
You can tell Stephen's a nerd, can't you, folks? Can't you?
For me personally, metaverse is behind NFTs and crypto, and I'm not touching those with a 10-foot pole yet either. So
fair enough. Yeah, it's still early days, and who knows how it's all going to.
I don't even have an Oculus, Steve. So
fair enough.
All right. I think we're going to wrap up the podcast. I can't talk again. Podcast. That's a problem with your podcast host, isn't it? You can't talk dry, but you got used to it, haven't you? I think we're going to wrap up the podcast part of the show, folks. Michelle's agreed to stay on for bonus content. How do you listen to the whole interview plus the bonus content and see the glorious Stephen looking as good as possible? Well, you can see all that on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel, which you need to go to, and please subscribe to it. And we got a ton of bonus content on that channel. Plus, you'll be able to see a recording of the live show that I do every Friday with Spencer Forum, which is all about building funnels and giving you breakdowns of your ones, and it's hilarious. You definitely want to see that. So, Michelle, how do people find out more about you and what you're up to, Michelle?
Sure. The best place, I love the idea of a link tree, but I hate giving somebody else my traffic, so I created my own. So I'm at meetmichelle.online. Use Cadence, by the way. Cadence and page builders to be able to do that, which is any page builder is phenomenal for that kind of thing. So meetmichelle.online, that'll get you all my social, that'll get you my website, everything else. One place, one-stop shop. You can find out everything you need to know.
Yes, and it's been a pleasure talking to you, Michelle, and hopefully you will agree to come back on the show later on in the year.
I would love it.
Stephen, how can people, your fan base? I've had email about where's Stephen? Where's the good-looking, charming co-host? I take that on my broad shoulders, Stephen, but I knew my place. So, Stephen, how can people find out more about you, Stephen?
Yeah, head over to hustlefish.com, and you can see what we have going on over there.
Right, that's great. We got, like I say, we've got some fabulous guests coming on the show in the next couple of months, folks. I'm amazed at the standard. Just like Michelle, we'll be having some great conversations that are focused at you, the WordPress professional, and you that are starting a startup. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye. So, bonus content. So, Michelle, community, it's become, I think, every year in the tech community, pun not intended, there's a buzzword. There's always a couple of buzzwords. I sense since the pandemic, I don't know how you describe where we are at the present moment. We're not post-pandemic, but we don't also seem to be in the teeth of the pandemic either.
Mhm.
Communities become, and building community seems to have become a real buzzword in the tech. Would you agree with that statement? And secondly, what do you really think? Only a slight question here, Michelle. What is community?
That's a great question. That's multi-layered question.
Oh, I'm notorious for them. Stephen will tell you. That's why we have questions now, instead of me just rambling on. Because I used to ask multi-point questions, Michelle, and the guests just used to look at me and think, "Where am I supposed to start here?" You know.
Well, let me start by defining how I see defining community. So I define community as a group of people who gather around a concept, an idea, or a location. So I live in a community. I live in Hilton, New York. That is my local community. Those are people who happen to be in the same place in space. And so that builds a community, right? I also think of family as a community. So my family is global. I have people literally all over the world who are related to me. My dad was one of 11 kids, and they all had kids, and they had kids, and so it's a huge. So my family is a community. There's almost 200 of us just from like one single set of grandparents, and so that's a community too, because we have family as something that binds us together, or has us come together. With WordPress, it is WordPress that's the community, right? So the one thing that we all have in common, if you're going to call it the WordPress community, is WordPress. And so whatever our affiliation with that is, whether it's that we build sites with that, whether that we build products that we use, whether we teach about how to do it, like whatever that is, that's the thing that pulls us together. I've thought about this a lot. So cars, right? There's the car community. There's the people who like really get into old cars and vintage cars, and it doesn't matter whether they're have like a Model T Ford or a '67 Corvette. I don't know if that's a thing. Anyway, like those like the old car people. But then there's like the modern car people too, right? So I drove a VW Beetle for a while. When I drove that car off the lot, I thought that every person who drove a Beetle would wave at me from their car. Like, hey, look, we both have Beetles, right?
I would wave at you, Michelle. I'll give you a wave.
I looked like an idiot because I was waving at everybody, and they were looking at me like, what? What? But Jeep has built a community. Every single person who has a Jeep, they have Jeep clubs. They deck out their stuff. There's Facebook communities around regional Jeeps. They have this thing called ducking, where like if you like somebody else's Jeep, you leave a rubber
Sounds
ducky.
a bit pervy to me.
You leave a rubber duck on their windshield that says, "I ducking love your Jeep." I mean, so these people are all in as far as what has bound them together is their love of their car, right? So, and it doesn't matter if it's a Jeep Cherokee or like, I don't know, Jeep truck or whatever. So there's all these different things that can pull people together that create community. And there are things that don't, right? So you have to think, if Volkswagen had done it right, they could have built a community around VW ownership. When the VW came back in 2007, 2008, like a community could have built up around that had they seeded it properly and made it something, gamified it in some way, shape, or form, so people wanted to be affiliated with each other for that car ownership. We do that with WordPress. It's like the opportunity to help one another, earn from one another, right? So I sell something, I make something, I actually make money doing what I do. I write an article for you and you pay me. Like there is an economy around WordPress for sure. All of that works together to build this, what we call community. And I think it can be nurtured, and I think we have nurtured it. I think that Automatic and the WordPress.org, I think they do a really good job of nurturing that. But I think that the people who are WordPress users around the world nurture it even greater than how it began. And I think the idea of these WordCamps and meetups and having all of those connections all over the place to do that really set the stage for a true community to sprout up.
I've just got a couple comments about what you just said. First of all, as usual, I'm going to be slightly controversial, Michelle. I think that our blessed leader, as I call him, tends to, or seems to, this is only my personal interpretation, downplay the importance of community to some extent, i.e., has been one of the major factors that grew WordPress to what has become. He tends to talk about Jetpack being a growth metrics. And I think the one, and to be fair to him, I think he talks about that because it's analytical data. When you talk about community, it's a very soft play. You can't measure it. You can't get a return on the investment. So it tends to be played down because you can't measure it coherently. But I actually believe it was one of the, obviously you've got to have something that works, that actually does the job. But I personally believe that the community element and WordCamps were one of the major drivers that grew WordPress to what it became or is, whatever it is. The second thing is it's around podcasting and radio, because I am going to Porto, and before COVID, I used to go to I tried to go to the WordCamps on the West Coast. I don't directly benefit. My business is agency and aimed at providing hosting and other things if you want to build a membership website on WordPress. So I don't get any direct benefit going, but I just used to go just to build relationships, and I just like supporting WordCamps, right? But what I found was that it's very hard to get engagement around a podcast. People don't tend to comment, or you encourage it, but you don't normally get a lot of feedback. But when I used to go to these WordCamps, I just get people coming up to me and say, "You're Jonathan, you're the host, WP-Tonic, I listen every week, Jonathan, you crack me up." Or they used to come up, "You're that English idiot, I find you really irritating. Why don't you let Stephen do it? You're an idiot." But they used to come up to me like they knew me, that I'm a personal friend. I don't know them from Adam. And they just used to come up and they talk to you like you were somebody like they were acquaintance, that you had met them a few times. I always found that really interesting. Is that part? I see it as I prefer building a tribe. You've got to have your own online tribe. I prefer the word tribe rather than community. Do you see where I'm going with that, or am I just rambling, Michelle, as I do?
I mean, I don't know that they're that different from one another. And I also I've used the word tribe in the past and been accused of cultural appropriation of the Native American people. And so I am actually, because I do so much work with underrepresented people, I don't use that word any longer. And I do stick to the word community for that very reason.
Right there, that's putting me in my place. I needed something. No, please go. I'm English, so I love people putting me in my place. I think I'm going to have our last question. I'm going to let Stephen have the privilege of asking it.
Cool. Quick comment on Matt Mullenweg. I think something that people oftentimes forget is, I think, the very beginning of Facebook, the way that Matt set Facebook up to be this community of remote people that worked on WordPress is what has flowed out into just the ecosystem of what WordPress is. And it would be very interesting to know is if it wasn't set up that way, could have there been a remote community that felt connected together? Or because that was the very core of what WordPress was at the beginning, if that enabled that to happen. It's one of those things that you can hypothesize about.
I'll have to ask him next time I talk to him, because I've interviewed him several times, and he's always been very gracious as somebody that I've been able to interview. And he does take a moment sometimes to think before he answers, which is probably smart. I should probably do the same, but
I've never done that, Michelle. It's so obvious, isn't it?
But when I think of, and I hear what you're saying about, Jetpack and that kind of thing, but I also think that he does value community. If you think about like just this past fall when they had the State of the Word and inviting, 50 people to New York City to be part of that, he could have done it just in front of his computer as he had before. But he realizes, and the people who work with him realize, that having people around, which is community, builds a better opportunity, and having people ask real life questions in the moment makes it better than I got all these questions in advance and could carefully think about how I wanted to respond. Right. So, I asked him a question from the front row at the State of the Word, and he had to think about that. And whether he answered it well or not is always up for debate. Right. Because you're asking something at that last second there, and you have to kind of come up with an answer. And I always think later, oh gosh, I wish I'd said this, that, or the other. And he may have the same kinds of responses. But the idea of how he has built things into community. The first time I ever met him, I was sitting at a table at WordCamp US. There was one seat left for lunch. And this man started walking towards the table, and he gestured to that chair and said, "Could I sit there?" And I said, "Of course." And I leaned down to my friend next to me. I go, "Don't look now, but Matt Mullenweg is about to sit down next to you." And he just sat with us, and we just had this conversation. And only the two of us knew who he was at the whole table, right? And so I got to introduce him to everybody else at the table because he's just a regular person too, but with a lot more responsibility.
I think, I'm going to think about what you just said, because I think I've been a bit cruel to old Matt, really, but he's I think he doesn't care shit what I say about him. Why would he? So I have a little plug. I'm English as well, so that's my cultural having a dig at people. I call it sarcasm. They call it pathetism. So there we go. So I think it's been a great interview. You dealt with me with the skill and plump that I expected, Michelle. You have to come back, hopefully. We'll be back. That's great, Michelle. We'll be back soon, folks, with another great interview. We'll see you soon. Bye.